Welcome to the Travel Like a Boss podcast, the radio show all about traveling like a boss by being your own boss. Stay tuned for weekly interviews featuring guests that have built their own online businesses. If you would like to have access to our entire back catalog, visit travellikeabosspodcast.com for instant access. And here's your host, Johnny FD.
Hey everyone, this is Johnny, and welcome to episode 133 of the Travel Like a Boss podcast. I am back with a future update with Stephen Ye.
What's happening, Johnny? Thank you for having me back. It's been a wonderful time out here, and first of all, I want to thank you not just for being on, but thank you for building this tribe out here, actually. I've been out here on and off for about 3 years or so, and whenever I talk to the new people coming in and I ask them like how they found out about here, most of the people is like through you. So it's just amazing, Chiang Mai itself is a very amazing place to be.
Yeah, I love Chiang Mai, and when I first started sharing it, it was like really just because I love Chiang Mai. There was no other reason. I think I started sharing and talking about Chiang Mai on my old blog, myfightcamp.com, which I haven't updated in about a year now. But I was sharing how great the Muay Thai was, how I was getting to be, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the low cost of living. And then when I discovered the nomad world, the business world, and I started talking about that, it was kind of almost like a natural extension.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great transition for me too, because I was living up in China, and I was living off of savings, and eventually I was first just going to do a visa run. And then I ran into your blog and you talked about drop shipping, and that's kind of up my alley because I did eBay stuff before. So I was like, you know what, this can be a good chance for me to make some money again. And the visa run and turned out to be me just staying here for quite a while.
So I think there's a lot. The reason why I wanted to have you on the show is you gave a talk at the Nomad Coffee Club a few weeks ago, and you shared your story on kind of everything you've done in this last couple of years. So you've stopped drop shipping, you went into something else, then you went to Amazon FBA, you made a ton of money, lost a ton of money, making money again. It's a very up and down kind of journey. Do you think that with all the ups and downs, that this is still coming out here is still a better choice than staying in California?
For me, most definitely. I'm not sure if people are wired differently. For me, I would not be able to stand going to a job that I didn't like. If I actually liked the job, maybe I could do it. But because this gives me the actual freedom to take control of my own life, and if I don't do well, that's my fault. If I do well, that's my doing. And every time that I make a mistake, it really sucks. By the way, I almost swear. Is it okay to swear on there?
Yeah. Do whatever you want.
So yeah, for me, it just makes total sense. Yeah.
By the way, I just realized, and I haven't said it yet, happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you.
How old are you today?
29.
29 and living in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I think the very first solo trip that I did was back in, I believe, 2010 maybe. I went to Peru, and then I made a good amount of mistakes there, but as you go along in life, you learn more and more, and the trip after that was much better. And I've just been traveling around. Before coming back to Chiang Mai, I was in Europe, going to different countries. In a couple weeks, I'm off to Nepal, which seems like an amazing place to go to. So just exploring,
Yeah, I like that. So you started traveling when you were 23, or at least solo, and then it seems like even though we see each other in Chiang Mai pretty often, you're gone a lot of the year. Like you've went in Bali a lot as well, and some other places.
Yeah, I've been to different places. I mean, Bali was one of them. I lived in Koh Phangan, which is an island in Thailand, for some time. In Europe, I went to Greece, Norway, Sweden. But to be honest, for me, and I feel like for a lot of people who have been traveling, this may sound crazy, but traveling is very tiring. Like after a while, I don't want to travel anymore, and I just want to settle. And for me, Chiang Mai is one of those places that I like to kind of just land and get grounded again and kind of just relax. Not just relax, but it's a very balanced place where I feel like whatever I need to get done can be done here. While let's say Koh Phangan, when I'm there, I don't want to work at all. There's even if I need to get work done, I'll do the very minimum, because it's really hard when it's hot The beach is right there. People are half naked. So every place has its benefits.
Yeah, you're not the only one who has said that. Chiang Mai to me is like the perfect home base to not just business wise, but even like health wise, to get back in a routine, to eat healthy, to exercise on a normal routine, get sun, do yoga, swim, CrossFit, weightlifting, whatever, pretty much whatever it is. Fitness wise, it's easy to get a routine here. And then diet wise, even though I'm sure there's some other places in the world that you have slightly easier access to health food, or to let's say you would have like a paleo menu somewhere. In Thailand, I don't know, it feels so easy.
For me, actually, Chiang Mai is hard diet-wise because there's so many good restaurants around that there's a lot of times I choose to go to those places. But if I was actually wanting to do a better regimen for health, it is one of the easier ways to find. There are health shops around, and there are salad bars around and salad buffets and stuff like that, so the options are there.
I think one of the reasons why it's easier is because everything's so cheap. So even if you order 2 or 3 menu items and you just don't eat the rice it comes with, you don't eat the bread it comes with, it ends up still being cheaper than trying to eat healthy in back in California, where a meal is going to be a health meal is going to be like $26.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just reminiscing when I first got here and I was just budgeting, it was like $500 a month or something. And, each meal I was just eating the kind of Thai food around, and it's like 30 baht, which is like $1 or so. And then now, I'm making much more money, so I don't really have to worry about it. But still, it's like, even if I just get whatever on the menu, it's still like at most $5. I think typically it's like $3 or something.
Yeah, and that's what I like about it is no matter how much your income grows in Chiang Mai, you end up still eating like $1, $2, or $3 Thai food just because it tastes so good.
Yeah, and my monthly budget for myself has raised, and especially living in Chiang Mai, what's wonderful here is I don't need to budget. I don't need to look at it. I just kind of buy whatever I want, and at the end of the month I'll still have extra money because it's so cheap here.
What do you think you're spending now on average
in Chiang Mai for this month? I paid like $500 for a gymnastics course, so if we took that out, I think it would be around $1,000, $1,200.
And that's like without even trying to budget, right?
That's not trying. I mean, that's like me getting massages 2 hours a day, like 3 to 4 times a week.
Yeah, and actually Steven treated me to a 2-hour massage the other week, so thanks for that.
Yeah, we're welcome, buddy.
Yeah, I think nowhere else in the world, especially not in the US, could you treat a friend to a 2-hour massage
unless you're making a shit ton of money. But
I think
we're doing okay, but
I think even then, like, how many people do I know, like, even people who are balling out back home, are like, oh yeah, I got this, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's just choosing and just paying it forward, right?
So a lot has happened since we last spoke on this podcast, which was episode 2, which means not only was it 130 episodes ago, but it was my second episode ever of this podcast. Do you remember that day?
It's been a while, but I kind of do. I remember it was actually at Pun Space in one of the small rooms. And it was an interesting experience because that was my first podcast. This might actually be my second.
Well, so you haven't gotten an interview with anyone else since then?
Yeah. Usually I don't like putting myself out in public, but from time to time I'll do it. And yeah, I mean, a lot has changed since then. I think in that podcast, it was after I made my first sale in dropshipping, and it's been quite a roller coaster ride financially, life-wise, but the growth that has come from since then is just incredible, and the journey continues, and I'm just excited and ecstatic of what's more to come.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it. I think that's kind of one of the big benefits of this podcast is we get a lot of people who normally don't do interviews, or normally, either they don't have the time or because they're just like normal people, they're not like out in the spotlight, but they're able to share their stories. And what that allows the listeners to do is see themselves kind of in your shoes. Because what we've done out here is very attainable. Like, I think pretty much anyone now nowadays can travel to Chiang Mai, live cheaply, and kind of just bootstrap some type of business. I don't think there's that big of a barrier to entry anymore. Whether or not they're going to be successful depends on them and how hard they're willing to work, how much they kind of persevere and push through. But do you agree that pretty much anyone can at least give this a shot?
I mean, whoever actually wants to do this, it's totally possible. You know, I mean, even I'm just throwing out some ideas, but like if you really want to do it, let's say even for airplane tickets. I'm sure Johnny posted this, but about airline points and you know, just spend $1,000-$2,000, you get a free trip out here. You know, on one of those airline credit cards. Super simple. And once you're here, it's like the cost of living, you can budget down to $400-$500 if you're bootstrapping. If you're going to spend $1,000-$1,500, you're going to be living like a fucking king. And you know, there's just, you can take a plane an hour away to go to one of the most amazing beaches in the world. So it's there. Now, like Johnny said, one of the most important aspects is if you're going to do this and you're just starting, understand you are going to be busting your ass. Sometimes it can be difficult, not sometimes, especially in the beginning, a lot of times, and you're just going to have to learn that that's just part of the process. And if you're willing to actually work, and if you're willing to actually get yourself to take action on the things that you have to do on a consistent basis, then I feel like you'll make it through and you can continue this journey if you want.
I absolutely agree with that. I would try to recommend people budget $600 a month just because it makes it a lot easier to live like kind of like a semi-normal life. You can still go to you can get a gym membership, you can get a co-working space membership instead of, you know, being in your tiny little crap studio and working alone. I think the reason why I like the $600 range is because it allows you to still kind of be social with other people and still be healthy, which I think is very important when starting a business, and one of the big benefits of being in Chiang Mai.
I think Johnny made a good point. Like I was doing like 500 3 years ago, and prices have risen a bit. So I think 600 is reasonable. You know, 400, 500, you're really bootstrapping it. 600, at least you're living kind of comfortably.
Yeah, and you know, but what's crazy is knowing that it is possible to actually live off a $400 a month budget. A lot of people do it, but I would say those are mainly like older expats that are retired, maybe some teachers. But for the nomad crowd, if you want a little bit of comfort, you know, you just don't like a studio apartment, maybe like not walking distance, but just a little bit further out, and you want to eat, you know, cheap Thai food every day, which is actually really good anyways. You probably want to do that the first 6 months you're here, but it's possible. But let's actually kind of jump back into where we left the last episode. So that was episode 2. If you guys haven't listened to it, it might actually be really interesting for you guys just to pause this and just download it right now, because I think that kind of sets the tone of how like fast life kind of changes. So I think at the end of the episode, you had just basically moved to Chiang Mai. You started a dropshipping store. You made your first sale. What happened from there?
Man, you're making me recollect 3 years ago, huh? Let me see. I made my first sale. I think it was, here we go. So it was for a dropshipping store that was selling a martial arts equipment, and it started doing decently well. I think I was selling about 3 a week or something like that. And then 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line, the company that I was actually buying from, they closed down. And the thing about that was it was a custom made product. So every time a customer bought, they would have to wait 2 to 3 months. So I ended up having to refund almost everybody, and I had to shut that one down. And then I ended up starting another dropshipping store, and that one turned out okay. For about a year or so, it was making $500. I'm not sure when that took off, but it did eventually, and then I did sell it like a year or two later. But one of the pivotal points was about a year after I first came here. I started dating someone, and I'm someone who likes to treat my woman out. So that $500 budget was not working out for me anymore. I started to overspend. And when that happens, I ran out of money pretty quickly. And that's when I really started to focus on business and not just the lifestyle. When I did that.
So let's actually pause there, because I think there's a lot to learn kind of just in that one section. So from the outside in, I think that the biggest mistake that happened with at least your first store, but maybe even your second store, was it was a very limited amount of suppliers, right?
Yeah, there was only one supplier for each of them, actually.
Do you think that was, I mean, kind of like in retrospect, what lessons did you learn from it? Was there anything you would have done differently?
In retrospect, for my first drop shipping store, I'm not sure if I would have done that because of the lag time, the wait time. Just because customers were emailing me, messaging me, asking me what's going on, when are they getting it, stuff like that, and so that can get kind of bothersome. The second one, it was just limited. I mean, once I got it up and running, I didn't have to do much. I just had to pass on the order to my supplier, but other than that, I didn't have to do much. So I still made money off of it, but there was no room to grow, and that's all it went.
So to kind of give everyone a hint, just so we can learn from each other's mistakes and kind of not make your own. If anyone is listening to this and you guys are starting a dropshipping store, one of the things that Anton teaches in his course is to only get into niches that have at least 20 potential suppliers, and this is a big reason for it.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and that's probably why after my second store I moved on. And well, it wasn't me moving on, it was me put in a position where I had to. So I was making that $500 a month, but it wasn't enough. So I ended up working for a buddy of mine. He needed some extra help, and he was just absolutely destroying it at that time and making $30,000-$40,000 a month. I think Johnny, you had him on your podcast as well.
Actually, before we get to that, so it sounds like that first kind of stage, I guess, your first stage of being a nomad, it was good for the time being. Like it kind of served its purpose. You know, you learned from it. It was bringing in enough money to live kind of like the cheap life in Chiang Mai, but then eventually you had to outgrow it. You're like, I'm done with this. How much did you sell that store for, by the way?
If I remember correctly, I think it was around like 8,000 or something like that.
Yeah, that's not bad actually, right?
It's not bad. It's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of chapter 1, and then chapter 2 was with Derek, who was actually on episode 99 of this podcast, and he was crushing it. He was making $30,000 a month in profit from Teespring.
It was incredible, and for me, I went in, and you know, he was not paying much, and I can't blame him. But what I actually wanted to do going in was actually learn what he was doing to make that amount of money. Because he was absolutely just killing it. And I was like, I was spending a good amount of time doing this dropshipping store, and you know, I can only tweak so much on my website. So I ended up working with him, and what I did was I was just very efficient and effective with the work that he gave me. It was a lot of grunt work at first, but that was okay for me because, you know, I expected that. I was the new person coming in. But I did it very quickly, and I asked him for more work. Why? Because when I asked him for more work, he would give me another piece of the puzzle. And as I learned more and more and more about this business model, about a month later, I was actually able to understand the whole system of how he is making money with this business. And then after that month and a half.
Well, so let's pause there as well. Mm-hmm. So Derek was basically working his butt off out of Punspace as well, where me and Steven were both at. So it's almost kind of one of those things where another big benefit of being in Chiang Mai is kind of the networking, because you probably never would have met this guy if it wasn't for being in Chiang Mai, if it wasn't for being in the co-working space, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the most incredible things about working at a co-working space, especially Chiang Mai, because Chiang Mai is a place where it's like people are doing so many different things, and you get to kind of pick their brain, you get to see what they're doing, and just see a whole different side of internet's business, and you're just like, whoa, I didn't even know that this was possible. I didn't even know this was going on.
Yeah, definitely. So what had happened was Derek wanted to scale his business, and he was working like 12 hours a day by himself. Yeah. So he wanted to hire a couple interns or a couple people to do kind of like the grunt work, as you said, and he paid you guys like pretty low monthly wage, right? Mm-hmm. But it was like was it a set salary?
Yeah, it was a set salary.
Okay, so it was enough to like get by, but do you remember how much it was?
I don't think it really matters, but I think it was like $500 a month or something like that. But
Okay, so like just like a standard, like basically like what you would pay a low level intern, right?
Yeah.
Like someone that like just an assistant.
Yeah.
But it was smart that you went in with the idea of working above that pay grade. I think a lot of people would have done the bare amount of work possible and said, okay, well, let me just keep collecting this $500.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Derek, when I came in, he already had 2 people in there. And then after I started working, there was another person there. And what I saw was the other 3, they were working as if that was their job. I was looking at it as if I was being mentored about this business. And that's why there are times when we didn't get done with the work 4 hours later. I would stay back. I would finish it. Even after those hours, I would study and see more about what's happening within this system. Like, how does that work? And piecing things together so that eventually I can do this myself.
Yeah, and I think that's a very smart way to go. I think one mistake that Derek actually made, I actually talked to him about this, was I suggested to him that in the beginning, it actually made a lot of sense to give people a flat rate because, they are basically just doing grunt work. But to kind of discourage people from going out and doing it on their own, I think what he should have done was he should have done like a profit share after that initial month of training or something and say, this is how much we're making per month now.
Yeah.
Anything above that, here's your percentage of that profit. And I think a lot of people would have stayed on and said, you know what, I can continue to be mentored by this person. I could probably make just as much, if not more, getting a percentage of the profits with him than trying to do it on my own and taking that risk.
You know what was really funny though? When I started launching my own, I had this great idea for a t-shirt template, and I went to him because there was this last little piece that I didn't know just yet, and I went to him and I was like, you know what, I got this great idea, and I'll split it 50-50 with you. And then I don't think he thought it was going to work. And so he said no, but he taught me that last piece anyways. And I went ahead and did it. And that month I made $12,000 profit.
Awesome. going from $0 to $500 a month of profit to $12,000 in profit, which is insane.
Yeah. And here's another thing I want to mention about that as well. It's like 12,000 is amazing, but I told this in a talk as well. After making that amount of money, I was at a Korean barbecue place. There was like 10, 12 people there. One of the people asked on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? I said it was like a 2 or 3 because at that time I was working my ass off. It was literally like 12-hour days, 14-hour days, like 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and I was just burnt out. My sex drive was low. Everything was just like shit. So that was a big lesson for me, that money is not everything. And from there I knew I had to transition into something that was more passive and more reasonable.
You know what's crazy, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is I bet everyone listening to this right now is like jumping on Teespring, like thinking like, this is it, Johnny, thanks so much for sharing the $12,000 secret. But here's the big secret is neither Steve or Derek do Teespring anymore. And it's exactly for that reason. Is because it's so much work, so much stress. And the worst thing about it is that once you stop doing it, that money just dries up. It's not like you're not getting any recurring passive income from that, right?
No, not at all. And so I knew that the next business model that I had to choose, there had to be some kind of passive income happening.
I like that. So actually during that time, I was sitting pretty much right next to you guys on the same table, and I saw the money coming in. I saw every time, like every day, there'd be an update like, oh, today we made $2,000, today we made $4,000 or whatever it was. And I kept thinking like, man, should I be getting on this? Is this something I should learn? And luckily, me and Derek are friends, so I asked him, I was like, is this something that I should get into? And I said, do you mind just explaining to me like everything that's involved, what I need to learn to do this? Because I wanted to kind of make an informed decision. Like, should I stay on the path that I was on, or should I jump ship onto this new hot, new hot path. And he explained to me like the whole, everything that was kind of involved. And then I looked at I was like, the amount of work that was going to take. And I knew I can do it, but it was going to be a 12-hour day. Like I knew it was not going to be, easy. And the main reason why I didn't do it is because I saw it as like a hot fad. I thought, do I want to try to make 10 grand this month or 20 grand this month from Teespring? Which not just Steven and Derek were making. There were quite a bit of people who were killing it that I knew personally too. So I knew it was working, but I also knew that it was one of these kind of fads that once you stop doing it or once it dries out, or once it gets oversaturated, which all three were probably going to happen, that it was gone. So I actually had chose to stay on my path and just keep doing what I was doing, even though at that time, I think if you guys go back to whatever month that was, my total income was like $5 grand or $6 grand a month. It wasn't that much, but I knew that if I spent the same amount of time and energy during that time to build up what I'm building, it would eventually be worth more and it would be sustainable.
Yeah, it was a very smart move. You were looking at it for the long run. While at that time for me, it was mainly coming from a survival mindset, which is not a good position to be. But fortunately, I did get out of that, and then the lesson was learned pretty quickly. And then I was able to transition out of that. And then the next kind of business model that came is called Amazon FBA, and that was something that I was quite interested in because I could see the passive income potential on this one. And it did require a higher startup cost. But I had the capital that I made there, and I'll give a warning: when you make your big bucks in the beginning, don't get over cocky because there's more challenges to come. So I ended up, Amazon FBA. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go all in with this. I used that $12K. I got 5-6 other 0% APR cards launched and used pretty much all of that credit. And also another tip: if you find a good mentor, listen to what he says, what he or she says, and what the criteria is. Because I listened to part of the criteria, but not all of it. And I'll tell you what, the first product that I did was a headache and a half. It was fucking miserable after a while. I remember it was like 3, 4, 5 months in, looking at my credit card statements, and I was like 60 grand in credit card debt, and it was just horrendous having to deal with that. Luckily, I was able to get myself out of that situation. It was quite painful that I almost decided not to do Amazon FBA anymore, but I just kept going. And with that experience I had with the first product in a crazy competitive niche, I entered niches that were much less competitive, and I was able to dominate, get on the first page, make money. And money right now is sitting pretty well, and I really haven't worked since March, so that's been like 7-8 months.
That's awesome. That's another entire chapter of your story. So far, we had gone from making $500 a month with drop shipping, and then making $500 a month as an intern, to making $13,000 a month doing your own crazy Teespring campaigns, then going 70 or 60 grand in debt trying to do Amazon FBA, and then now can I ask how much you're clearing a month now?
Typically it's been around 10K. This month, I don't know if it's just the month or it's something with my products. It has gone down to like 6, 7, but I'm okay with that for now, because I know once November, December hits, those the numbers usually triple to quadruple. And I'm kind of just even, it's weird because even though the money has dropped, I'm still not that financially focused at the moment to get scared or anything to go in and try to do something about it.
Okay, that's awesome, dude. Congratulations on all that success. I'm happy you were able to pay off those credit cards, because that would have been like, once that the 0% APR ended at 24.98% or something, that would have destroyed you.
Yeah.
So I guess, part of it is high risk, high reward. I'm sure you learned a lot from that first product as well as taking everything out. But really good points that you made is, if you're part of a course, if you have a mentor and they tell you to do something, don't ignore half the advice and just do the half that is easy for you or that is pleasing to the ear.
Yeah.
Like, you have to do the whole thing.
Absolutely. Especially if you find a good mentor and they know exactly what they're talking about. In the beginning, listen to everything that they say. Once you actually understand it, if you have kind of like a spin or something on it, maybe you can do it. But especially in the beginning, like, follow the formula because it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I highly agree with that. Actually, even with dropshipping, with my second store, I went a little bit out of Anton's criteria. He has like a price range of products that he likes to sell. And I was like, you know what? Let me just go like a little bit over it. But I think because I had the experience of running the other stores, I knew I could make it work.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like if I had tried that for my first store, it would have failed for sure.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So for your FBA business, how many products do you have now, and how many have you had? So I guess my question would be, how many have you had total? How many of them were a success, and how many of them weren't a success?
To be honest, I don't know the exact number, but I will say about half of them did not make it and half of them did. And I am still making money off of it because the half that didn't make it, it was the initial cost that I put in. While the ones I did, I'm reinvesting the money into it. So it pays off at the end.
Okay, so the 10K, so you're making around 10K profit a month right now, and then how much of that are you reinvesting to buying inventory?
I mean, now it's like I said, I haven't really focused too much on it, so it's whenever the inventory is needed, I'll just order. So I'm not calculating. Like before, my goal was to actually get my bank account, my business bank account, close to zero, because I would be putting in more inventory. I would be looking for more products and putting money on those initial products. But now, because I'm transitioning into something else, I'm just allowing what I have to run while I explore other options.
The really interesting thing about FBA was besides Teespring, that was the only other business that I saw a lot of people doing super well with in my social circle at the co-working space, that I was really considering, thinking like, am I stupid for not jumping in on this? And it was a really hard decision. I think I actually, like, I had like sleepless nights trying to just think, should I stay on my path or should I get into this? Because obviously it was working. I think now, kind of looking back, I'm glad I didn't go into it. Not that I wouldn't have made money. I honestly think I would have made quite a bit of money from it. But I also think that it would have taken me on a whole new, like a whole different path.
Yeah.
And my advice to kind of everyone out there listening to this is, if you're happy on your path and you see that you can grow and become more and more successful on it, stay on that path. Don't chase the shiny object.
Yeah.
But if you haven't started something yet, background analyze what is working with other people, and then just jump in, head first. Maybe don't jump in too head first and take out 6 credit cards, but have faith in yourself, kind of invest a little bit and go for it.
Yeah, it's very sound advice, because that's what's happening right now is I've jumped into all these different kind of fads of business models. And what I found is, after a while, in the beginning stages, it's kind of fun and it's kind of exciting and it's new. But after a while, I'm just looking at this stuff and it's like, do I really want to continue doing this? Not really. What do I really want to do? And I'm in the position right now where money is comfortably coming in, so I do have the freedom to choose wisely now, and to choose from my heart what I actually want to be doing. Because I look around the world nowadays, and there's so many people just doing jobs that they don't like, and it's fucking horrendous.
I almost kind of felt that way even with Amazon FBA, and the reason why I never got excited about it is I knew that most likely whatever product I chose wouldn't be something I was passionate about. It would kind of just be like doing the research, seeing what's trending, what you can rank for, and then private labeling that product from China. And not really, like, it probably wouldn't have been something that I was like proud of. It was kind of like me just kind of selling some okay or crap item with better stock images, better descriptions, more keywords, and lots of reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I won't give away my particular products, but let's say like I would just do research and I find that scrub brush is making a lot of money. I'd be like, ooh, that's a winner. I'm going to do that. But at the end of the day, I give zero fucks about scrub brushes. And after a while, like I mostly won't even buy the products that I sell. And for me, it's starting to get to a point where there's like moral and ethical backdraws to that particular business model, because I want to be able to emit high quality content, products, whatever it is, but in this particular business model, it's usually shit products, and so there's a conflict within me. And that's why I'm switching out of it.
I think this is actually a big downside, and kind of it's going to lead to the fall of Amazon. Right now, I think everyone's thinking, oh, that's impossible. Like, we buy everything on Amazon. It's so convenient. We love it. They have like the 1 day shipping or Prime, 1 hour shipping with Prime. I think that even though Amazon is trying to clean it up now, they just introduced a new rule where now they no longer allow bot reviews or reviews of free products or discounted products, which is going to really kind of discourage or make it harder for people to create a new product and create artificial hype through reviews. But I think people, number one, all the existing ones are out there, and there are literally tens of thousands of products already that are established with game reviews. Those are going to remain up there, and it's going to be really hard for a new product to come in and kind of beat them, even if they're a better product. And personally, as a customer, I actually don't shop on Amazon anymore because I see through the bullshit.
Yeah.
Like when I was trying to buy some accessories for a GoPro, I could not find a quality product that wasn't some, FBA'd Chinese knockoff with with fancy photos and fancy marketing and fake reviews.
Yeah.
And I just decided, you know what? I don't even want to buy this anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing is, I just noticed today that they're actually knocking out the discounted reviews. So at least for one of my products, about 100 reviews were removed, and it is what it is. But yeah, the Amazon Marketplace is definitely changing. It is starting to be filled with cheap products. It might end up turning out to be like Walmart or some shit like that. But yeah, that's why I'm moving on. It's something that's I just don't desire to do anymore. It was good at the time. It's provided me enough financial stability where I was able to switch from a fear-based money mentality to kind of like, I am free. I have the ability now to relax my mind to really see what I actually want to put out in the world.
And I think it's really important. And I congratulate you for getting to that point.
Thank you.
I think this is a point that everybody should get to really make a big difference in the world, to really start being able to create products that help the world or help society or are innovative or unique. I think that it's almost kind of like in the beginning, you kind of have to just grind your teeth and do a business that makes money. Whether it's work a job that maybe you don't love, but you can learn something from, or it can help you save up enough money for you to invest in the next thing you want to do, or give you the time to do it. But I think it's really, really important for everyone to kind of have the goal and say, at what point do I start doing something I really love doing? Is it a financial point? I need to save up X amount of money and then I can go do what I want to do? Or do I need to learn X skills and then I can do it? Or even time, like, do I want to just enjoy a year of living in Thailand on the cheap and just kind of detox and relax, maybe have time for health and fitness, and then I'm gonna crush it?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are definitely good questions to ask. And one other thing about the financial side, especially if you're in the States, be very careful, because you're surrounded by the mentality of keeping up with the Joneses. So even if you strive to make more money there, you have to be consciously aware of, when you make that more money, to not look at the shiny new car and be like, ooh, I have enough money to go pick that up. If that's what you want to do, fine, but realize that wherever you are, you'll still be there. If you want to start traveling, then keep that in mind so that you can start saving and you can take that money to move somewhere else.
Yeah, really good points. Actually, in the latest episode of my other podcast, Invest Like a Boss, it was episode 23, and the whole episode was basically talking about that mentality of how to actually have money to invest with. Because I think a lot of people who love the new podcast are like, man, I found all these cool new investment vehicles or new like types of of ways to invest, but I don't have any money to invest. How do you actually save money? And a big part of the episode was me explaining, kind of growing up as Asian American, being frugal, and then being forced to live kind of a frugal lifestyle. When I first came to Thailand, I had this $600 a month budget. That's allowed me to have the mindset to say, okay, even though I'm making a lot more money now, I can live off of a very basic lifestyle, and then I can actually take that money and buy assets versus buying liabilities.
Yeah. I think that's very important. And it was a good idea to create a new podcast about that, because we're living in a world where at this moment money does mean survival, and if you're constantly worried about your money situation, then within yourself it's a constant worry about your own survival, and to live in that state is fucking shitty. I'll tell you that. I know it. I've gone through it.
Yeah, I've been through that as well. And I think it's really easy for us to now say, like, you have to do what matters in the world, and, what you're passionate about, and think, long-term future.
Yeah.
But I think when we're in that situation of not knowing how we can pay rent, not having enough money, for healthcare if something happened, in some cases not even being able to afford a plane ticket back home.
Yeah.
That's when you get a bit desperate, and we start thinking about today and about tomorrow instead of 3 months or 2 years from now.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the very base is about survival. And until you really establish that, you can't move on, and you can't really think about other things. So that's why I was mentioning about being careful about, the quote unquote keeping up with the Joneses, because if you continue to increase your expenses every single month, even though you do have the shinier new car or the nice brand new house, you're still in a fucking rat race, kind of trapped, because every month you're going to have to keep paying extra and extra, which means that you're still stuck in the survival mode, and you can't really move up. So I have been able to clear that first stage, and now I'm moving towards a stage where I actually want to help humanity in a way. And for me, it's to bring out more realness, because I see being out here for 3 years and just seeing how people make money. So how many fucking scams are out there is just incredible. And how people use a fear-based psychological trick to get you to buy stuff is ridiculous. And I don't just see that here though. It's not just within our circle. When you see it here and you understand it, you see it everywhere.
Can you give us an example of that? Oh, I can think of one right now. So it's not Chiang Mai. It's not the people of Chiang Mai. The only thing is we have access to people who will tell us what they're doing, versus when you're back home and you're online and you go on, let's say, one of those websites that have like funny memes, all right, for example. I don't know what they're called. I don't even go on them anymore. But like someone shares something on Facebook, this funny meme. You go on the page. And to look at the funny thing, and you share, and it says like click here to share, and you share it. On that page will be a bunch of thumbnails for other articles that are actually sponsored posts, and they'll say, like look how this woman made $5,000 playing online.
I was thinking the same exact what is you. It's a little spin-off to that, because it'll be I just remember this one article, and it's a fabricated article. It will show a picture of a crying man because he's so happy, and it'll say he was down to his last $100, and then this happened. You click the article, it goes in, and then it explains how he was about to lose his house and his family and stuff like this, but he decided to join this online casino, and he signed up and he hit the jackpot and won $60,000, and now he's up, he has money to pay off the mortgage and keep the family, etc. And then every time someone actually clicks on that link to go to the online casino, some guy, you never know where he is, he's somewhere, is making like $150, $200 off of you for you signing up, because they know that people can lose up to $50,000 in online gambling.
Yeah. So here's what really bothers me about this is the fact that people like there's two sides of it. Okay, I think one is there are people who basically are just trying to make money online. Like they don't care about ethics or morality. They're like, let's figure out what people want to hear, what people like would want to share online, and let's just kind of tailored to them, because people love stories where someone really was down on their last $100 and then they like figure out a way to actually get back on their feet. And there's so many experiences of people actually doing that. I mean, you are a real life example of someone who was down to very little money and then worked his butt off, figured out a way to work his butt off to make a lot of money.
Well, I actually worked my ass off.
Yeah. So like that story is inspiring to people, and this is what people, that's why people are drawn to it. That's why people click it, and that's why people share it. That's why people sign up for whatever they talk about, is because they want that hope. They're like, you know what? This is like such, this is such an inspiring story. I'm down to my last, couple $100. I have a family. I want, a way out. And what really pisses me off about these, they call them flogs, fake blogs, where, these articles that people write that are completely fabricated, is the fact that it tricks people into, having false hope and following something that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And, after being around and seeing all this business models, I'm just fucking sick of it, Like I was close to getting into one that I knew, because of my story, because of the lifestyle that I live, I knew I could just fucking kill it and make a lot of money. But I knew everybody who came in because of me, they were all fucked. They didn't have the skills to pull it off, and I just couldn't do it. And that's why I have been adamant, and I'm just I'm ready to move on, and I'm ready to make a business that I'm actually proud of,
Yeah, I like it. What's crazy is I get offers from like these crazy MLM companies all the time, and I know that if I wanted to sell out and I joined some fucking pyramid scheme, and I was like, hey guys, like join my empowerment network, whatever, under me, and then you can get this and then this and this. I know for sure I would make a crap load of money from it. I know I would probably make like $100,000 a month doing it for the first, like, I don't know, however many months.
Yeah.
And then all these people will get freaking screwed, because none of them will, like, because then the way that like MLM works is the people under you probably never gonna make anything.
Yeah.
And then I'm just gonna screw everyone.
Yeah.
And then here's a stupid way of thinking, is then for the rest of my life, everyone's gonna be like, fuck this guy. He tried to get me to join some pyramid scheme. But and I think it's so easy for some people to have that scarcity mentality to be like, oh, I can make $100,000 this month. Yeah, let me join this thing. So I think it's like a tough thing where, in my mind, there's only two ways to battle this if we want to make a difference. One is to educate people so they don't fall for stupid crap. But that's a bit hard, because to be honest, I really, really believe that people who sign up for this stuff, it's not because they're stupid. It's because they are looking for that shortcut. They're like, oh, click 2 clicks and I can make this much money, or online gambling, I have this insight, whatever. I honestly think people who fall for this stuff, the so-called stupid people that fall for stuff, it's not because they themselves are stupid. It's because they trick themselves into falling for something because it's going to be easy, or it seems like it'll be easy, and people don't want to do the work.
I mean, that's a psychological trick that happens, and it's all around. People want the quick fix. There is no fucking quick fix. Figure that out already. For everything, for your health, there is no one pill that you can take to lose all that gut fat that you have. Fucking work it off, Johnny, amazing transformation within a couple weeks. He went binge eating somewhere. He came back. He knew he wanted to get healthy. Three fucking weeks later, he looks fucking fantastic.
I appreciate that. So that's actually an update if you guys are on my email list. When I came back from Europe, 4 months of drinking beer, eating pasta in Italy, and then being on a cruise ship, it was a buffet for pretty much 12 nights. I gained so much weight. I think I gained like more than 20 pounds, like easily, maybe even probably close to like 20 kilos, which is like 30-40 pounds. And I came back and I'm like, you know what, it's time to fucking work. I sent out an email kind of describing everything I'm gonna do. I'll probably do an update, but it's basically everything I knew that works. Eating healthy, not eating sugar, not eating processed foods, going out and exercising. I didn't take any pills. I didn't take any. There's no quick fix. There's no like magic bullet. It was really just hard work.
Yeah.
But this is actually the second point that I want to bring up is the first way is to educate people on not being lazy, not looking for shortcuts. But the second way is actually offering them an alternative, because I think so many people are so desperate where they want to lose weight, because they're sick of being fat or sick of being overweight, sick of feeling bad and not having energy, or they're sick of being broke and they're like, fuck, I hate my job. I want to be able to, replace my income. I want to make money online. I really think that because these other companies will never go away. I don't think that's a possibility of these companies ever going away completely. They might change, they might evolve, but that will always be out there. So for us to combat it is really to give people an alternative. And I think that's why it's so important to share what actually works.
Yeah.
Whether it's a type of diet eating plan that may take a lot of work, a lot of effort, but really genuinely works. Or an exercise plan, that, requires real work. It's not a 2-minute a day workout. It's not, but really genuinely works. Or a business that might take 2 months to set up, and you're only making $500 a month, but it's a real $500 a month that you can get. Or an FBA business, which might also take 2 months, and then, tens of thousands of dollars, like $10,000 in inventory, and there's a risk, but it's something that actually works.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. I feel like those 2 points are valid. Education. People need to start understanding. And again, like you were saying, some people don't. Well, they'll learn the hard way. But there are people out there who do want to learn. Whoever's on this podcast, they're willing to learn, And it's for you, it's for I to teach them, because we've learned a lot through all these different business models of what's actually going on. And there's a lot of shady shit, and it's not just around this community. It's fucking everywhere. We're living in a fucking fabricated world, and I'm just tired of it. I'm sick of it. And my mission is to create realness in this reality.
I like it. And it's really cool that you bring that up, because the whole world, especially on social media, really is fabricated. Like Photoshop. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to get in trouble for this, but like makeup, a slimming vest for men, like fake 6-pack airbrushing, or even just happiness, right? Yeah. Like all these things are fabricated online, but the trick is to be able to kind of see past it and say, okay, I know that there are these like overnight kind of flashy gimmicks, but I also know there are legitimate ways to get that end result if that's something I want.
Here's the foundation of what you need to know. Businesses make money when they can solve problems. In reality, there's really not that many problems. So businesses will go out there and create problems for you so that you feel like you have a problem. Oh, you're ugly. Wear this makeup. Oh, you're too fat. Take this pill. Oh, you're not in this social circle because you don't have this type of car. It's all fucking made up. And if you can understand that on a deep level, then you kind of unlayered yourself from a certain matrix, a certain paradigm. And then when you free yourself from that, I'm telling you, it's very freeing. When you first just rip that part off, then you're able to see the world in a whole different way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think like when I go back to California, I see the things, the fancy clothes, fancy cars, the super nice Ethan Allen looking apartments or houses that my friends live in. And on a level, I do want it. I'm like, man, that would be nice to have, But at the same time, I think the difference is now I see it and I know I don't need it. So even if I would enjoy it, I know even if I didn't have it, it's okay.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't enjoy it, because I think that's also lying to ourselves if we were like, oh no, like I wouldn't enjoy driving a Ferrari. Hell yeah, you would. If you never, anyone who says they wouldn't enjoy driving Ferrari is either delusional, they're lying to themselves, or if they've never driven one before, they never thought it was an option. But do I need a Ferrari? No. That doesn't mean that I can't have it set as a goal and say, you know what, if one day I have so much extra income that I can also have this just for the enjoyment, even though I don't need it, why not?
Yeah, you made a really good point there. I think that kind of completes that, because no, it's not like I want to live in a cave. I do enjoy these things. I would enjoy a Ferrari. I would enjoy driving around in Tesla. I do like wearing suits from time to time and look good. It's a matter of more like inner self. Like, how do I feel if I didn't even have any of those? Do I still feel complete complete without any of those. If, you know, in the Western society, they have created the world and shaped the mind to make you think that if you don't have these things, then you are not worthy of love. You are not worthy of friendship. It's fucking horrible, man. And
and I can guarantee you, every single person listening to this right now, everyone's worthy of love. Everyone's worthy of friendship. Everyone's worthy of something. And whether, you know, it doesn't mean that you're worthy of love with someone who, you know, it looks like a supermodel and is, you know, has traveled the world and, you know, has six-pack abs, if you yourself have never left your mom's basement or 200 pounds overweight and have never read a book. But you are worthy of, you know, wherever you are, whoever you are right now, you are definitely worthy of love for someone who's a compatible partner. I also believe that if we want more from life, that we can be better versions of ourselves, and then we can be worthy of even more love or even more friendships, or even more you know, more whatever we want.
For me, I don't think it's like of more love or more friendship. I think when you start to shed the extra fat, or you start to kind of release the need of the sports cars and things like that, you're sculpting yourself. It's like all that extra fat and all that extra need that I want this, I want that. It's like this sucking energy that you're carrying around with you, that's sucking your own energy, that's sucking other people's energy. And when you start to remove that, then your true self is starting to unveil. And when you do that, then it's like things are just drawn to you.
You know, I think that's a great way of putting it, and much better than the way I just put it. Because I think that the material or the things on the facade, things like money or status or even being in shape, you know, I think these are all superficial things that them by themselves don't actually mean anything, and those things aren't what gives you more in life or like better in life. It's the fact that it's almost like a token of, I don't want to say success, but like a token of you obtaining these goals or think these things are important. So for example, when I hang out with, like, let's say I meet someone at a networking event, right? It's not because a person makes X amount of money that I decide to become friends with them. Someone could technically be broke or have no money, and I would still, you know, really want to hang out with them, you know, in a networking sense. But the fact that, let's say they are financially successful also probably means that this person has the right mindset, that they've read, you know, the right books, they have, you know, like the knowledge, the things that I'd want to attract. If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I don't know what the exact quote of Jim Rohn, but what he says is, the point is not to make the $1 million. The point is to get yourself to a version of yourself that can actually get $1 million. Because whoever the process that it takes for you to get $1 million ethically and morally, your character is just amazing.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think me and Nick actually talked about this in one of the last episodes, where it's money is kind of just like a representation of success. It doesn't mean by having more money you're successful, but it is a very easy way to kind of keep track of your success. And I think the same thing with, like, let's say you're even being in shape. It's not necessarily that I only want to be, you know, friends with people or only date people who are in shape just because of that. The fact is, if someone, let's say, is a fat slob, they probably, you know, and they're like, let's say someone is 40 pounds obese, or, you know, like I was like a month ago or a couple months ago, I don't want to hang out with that guy. Because I'm like, this person doesn't care about their health. They're probably not very motivated. They probably can't just, you know, they probably don't have the willpower to follow a simple, like a simple diet or exercise plan. They don't care about themselves enough to, you know, to take care of themselves. They, you know, or they don't value it. I don't like, and if I'm the type of person who wants to be the best version I can be, to be the healthiest, have the most energy, to look the best and feel the best for myself, I don't want to be with someone who that doesn't care about the stuff, or sadly, even someone who can't achieve that, because you want to run with the pack. You want to run with other cheetahs that can keep up.
And to that point, I do agree with you. It's, you know, for myself, I want to get in the best shape possible. I want to be able to create wealth for myself. I want to be healthy. I want to be able to attract the woman that I want into my life. One thing I would be cautious about is not everything is external though, because those things like the financial success, you can calculate that. The woman, you can see the beauty and you can see what she looks like. Even health wise, you can see the six pack, you can see the muscles, but you can also see out there's a bunch of egotistical fucking dickheads out there who have six packs, who has a shitload of money, who has a Ferraris, right? So I feel like there is the outer success and then there's also the inner success.
I 100% agree with that. And I think even though it's very easy for us to measure things on the external because it's there, you can see it. I think when it comes down to it, if I met someone at a networking event that was super successful or rich, but they were a douchebag or they didn't seem trustworthy, I would not want to hang out with them at all.
Yeah.
But definitely, I would say it's hard to describe that, right?
That's the thing. It's not quantifiable, right? And when you go more talking about the inner, this is an awareness that most people have not really explored. For me, I almost feel like I naturally grew up with this. Maybe it was because I had this very intense eczema all around my body, so I was very aware of what was happening inside. But it's just a feeling that you get from people, and people can call this vibes. People, usually people say, "Oh, that guy has bad vibes," or "That guy has good vibes," and it's not very quantifiable, but people are able to sense it.
Yeah, and I'm very good at sensing it. I would say I'm a little bit too quick to judge or too quick to read people because when I meet someone for the first 2 seconds, I already make up my mind if I want to be friends with them or not. Even before they really open their mouth about anything, after that first sentence. And I think it's a pro and a con, where one of the positives is I don't waste time with people that I'm not going to connect with. That people that, I don't want to, that isn't on, that I don't, feel like is going to be a value to my life or my friend, or my friendship. But at the same time, sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes it takes some time to get to know someone. Someone might just be super shy, or they're nervous, or they're whatever it is, and it's very unfair, and I might be losing out on some great friendships by just judging people too quickly.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of just yesterday. There's a guy here in Chiang Mai, and I might even do a video or something with him. But at first he was reaching out to me and I could tell that, he was trying to be cool. He was like, "Hey, bro Slice, how you doing, homie G?" Not exactly those words, but it's very similar to that. And for me, I didn't want to hang out with that because it takes effort for me to filter out all that bullshit. And I'm already spending a lot of time, creating my own goodness within my realm. And for me to have to deal with that, it's just too much work. So he reached out to me 3-4 times like that. And I just said, no, I'm busy. I can't do it. But then he wrote something that was actually authentic. He was like, "You know what? I really feel true. I really feel that we can connect. I really feel that, I don't know. I felt that it came from a genuine place. And because of that, I decided to give him a shot. And we met up, and he's actually a really cool guy, And I broke that barrier of superficiality with him it was almost within a minute. I said, "Hey, the reason why it took me so long was because I saw all this bullshit." And because I said that, honestly, he accepted it and he was like, "Yeah, I know." And then he opened up and he was actually him. And when he was actually him, I enjoyed being with him.
I'm really happy that you did that, and really good on you for being honest and, telling someone something that may hurt them instead of just kind of ignoring them or not giving them the guidance. I'm glad there are people like you out there, because I don't want to take on that responsibility myself. I honestly, I think at this point I'm so busy, and I already have enough friends where I don't want to be that coach, or I don't want to be the person to change someone. I want them to figure it out. I don't want to say figure it out themselves, because sometimes it's really hard to just figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
But there's enough tools out there. There's enough enough podcasts, books, YouTube videos, and people like you who are willing to take their time and energy to kind of guide people or to help nurture them, that eventually when they do become authentic, or they do become a genuine abundance mindset, high value giving person, then when I see them again a year or two from now, then we'll be friends.
Yeah, I mean, It was great to see that transformation because even after that, he started to reach out to other people authentically. And then, I was home at night. I was about to go to sleep, and then he just sent me the text of the people responding, and it was just like really good actual connections happening. I'm just like, awesome, that's great. And for me, I feel like that's what I want to do is, like I said, to bring back the realness back into reality, because right now, we're living in super fast times with Facebook and everything. You can get connected with people very easily, but it's also typically a very superficial connection. And we forgot how to actually, heart to hearts, be with someone,
I like it. So do you have ideas for what your next project or your next plan is?
I have some ideas right now. I'm not sure if I want to just launch it right now. There is definitely a possibility. I am going to Nepal. I'm not sure what the internet is like over there, but the ideas are starting to accumulate, and when I'm ready,
Okay, cool. So if people want to keep in touch with you, what's the best way?
You know what? If you want to keep in touch with me right now, I'm not on that many social media stuff, but you can add me on Facebook. Stephen Ye, Johnny, you can post a link or something. Add me as a friend. I don't know how many will be out there, but do it anyways, and we'll stay connected there. And whenever I'm actually ready to, launch what is in my vision, I'll do that. You'll be connected with me on Facebook, and then you can see it from there.
That's pretty cool. We'll make sure we have a link to your personal Facebook. Do not add me as a friend if I haven't met you in person. You can add my business page, Johnny FDK, but my personal Facebook, I kind of reserve it for people I've met in person already. But I think that's cool that you kind of share so openly.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Johnny.
Hey, thanks for being on the show. And thanks everyone for listening to Travel Like a Boss. Keep those iTunes ratings coming, because that is the way that the show kind of gets more well known, more spread, and reaches more ears of people just like you. So hopefully we'll see you out here in Chiang Mai, and if not, keep listening and keep subscribed. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to the Travel Like a Boss podcast. If you want to hear more, including the bonus How to Choose the Perfect Niche episode, join our mailing list at travellikeabosspodcast.com. See you next week, and remember, if you want to travel like a boss, you need to be your own boss. So start your online business today and start living the lifestyle you've always dreamed of.